Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Israel Brief with me, Rolene Marks, where we take a look at those top stories making headlines. We do it every Monday to Thursday. Guys, you can hear I'm still not great, still not 100%. I'm going to try and get through this as quickly as possible, so as not to subject you to my lurgy, and also to go and get some much needed rest. As always, the Israel Brief is brought to you in partnership with these guys, Lay of the Land, and a reminder that if you would like to receive our weekly newsletter, please subscribe via our website or be in touch with us via social media. So guys, let's take a look at those top stories. It is day 664 since the 7th of October. And as I remind you all, and as the world seems to have forgotten, especially in light of all these announcements of the intention to recognize a Palestinian state at the UNGA in September, we still have 50 hostages captive in hell in Gaza. While the world is speaking about the humanitarian crisis for Gazans, and for 1 second I do not deny it, the humanitarian aid needs to get to the people of Gaza. We call on the United Nations to distribute the aid that is piling up at the crossings, and we call on the international community to drop more aid in. You know, it's one thing to criticize, but it's another thing to actually come and do. But for 20 hostages who we believe are still alive out of the 50, they are in starvation, they are being tortured, and we need to speak about them. So let's take a look at the top stories, and we're going to go through your headlines before I get to your mensches and your morons, as well as take the audience question. And we begin with an announcement from Canada last night, also following the trend, announcing that they will recognize a Palestinian state at the UNGA in September. So Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, at least his phraseology, his wording was not as insane as Keir Starmer, who issued basically a diplomatic ultimatum. If you aren't familiar with what Prime Minister Starmer said, he said that Israel has until September to agree to a ceasefire, bearing in mind Hamas have turned down all ceasefires on the table, or the UK will recognize a Palestinian state. He put the onus squarely on Israel. So we can expect Hamas to refuse another ceasefire, and they will get the reward anyway. It's absolutely preposterous. So going back to Canada, Carney said that this is predicated on much needed reforms of the Palestinian Authority. It must be a demilitarized Palestine, and they want to see some reforms and democratization, and this would include elections. A reminder that Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas is in the 20th year of his 4-year term. So I guess that takes care of elections. He also said there must be the immediate release of hostages, and there can be no Hamas in a future Palestinian state. And he recognized there is absolutely no question Israel's right to exist. Now, of course, this has elicited strong response from both President Trump and from Israel. Israel called it rewarding Hamas, and it harms the efforts to achieve a ceasefire in Gaza. Just yesterday, a Hamas spokesperson said, that they welcome these announcements from the United Kingdom and France that they are getting victory sooner than expected. So when Hamas is lauding you, perhaps you are not on the right side of history. It's not the diplomatic flex that you think it is. President Trump cautioned Canada that this could seriously impact on their trade agreement. as many of you are aware, President Trump is busy meeting with world leaders to hash out tariff agreements with each leader. Meanwhile, an Australian minister said that this is not a question of if, but when for Australia. And Germany weighing in earlier today saying that, a two-state solution must be the end of a process. In other words, it has to be negotiated. We can't just enforce it, but the door towards it must open. And today's audience question is with regards to a two-state solution. So I'll deal with some of the nitty-gritty in that. Israel's Ministry of Foreign Affairs confirmed today that more aid had been successfully delivered to Syrian Jews in the southern town of Sweda. As we have been speaking here at length on the Israel Brief, the Syrian regime forces have been persecuting Alawites, Christians and Druze, but have specifically targeted Druze with basically a genocide that the world seems to have forgotten about. 2 million shekels worth of food went in, including food, medicine, medical equipment and first aid kits. Now, earlier today, aid organizations tasked with delivering aid to Sweden complained that Syrian rebel forces were not allowing them in. I guess that I must have missed all the marches and all the international outcry about the fact that Syrian Jews are now being routinely starved. But hey, if you can't demonize Israel, there's no point in it. Am I right? And as we speak, the US Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, is meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu. There will be conversations around negotiations to free the hostages and a ceasefire agreement. If you recall, last week, Witkoff, very frustrated with Hamas, withdrew his team from negotiations, as did Israel. Witkoff will also visit the GHF, that's the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, inside Gaza and see the work for themselves. Now, I know there is a story circulating from a whistleblower, and as I said on yesterday's broadcast, that has been roundly debunked. So I urge all of you to look for the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation YouTube and watch their statement complete with receipts over there. When Tisha B'Av concludes on a Saturday night, President Herzog will visit Latvia, Estonia and Lithuania at the invitation of those countries' presidents. The visit will last about 3 days and will focus on advancing efforts to free the hostages, as well as strengthening bilateral relations and diplomatic efforts in the face of national security challenges. And finally, let's end on a very, very high note. And Israel's economy, despite everything, is holding strong. And this is evident in yesterday's announcement that Palo Alto, the tech giant, will be buying Israeli company CyberArk for $25 billion. This makes it the second biggest buyout in Israeli history. And the intention is for Palo Alto to bolster their cyber offerings with identity security to better compete with Microsoft. So, brilliant boost for the Israeli economy. So before we get into the mensches and the morons, let's take a look at the audience question. It comes from Selma in Panama, who says, can there really be a two-state? So excellent question. Now, as I've said before, Western countries are absolutely married to this idea of a two-state solution. They think that a two-state solution is going to magically solve everything. But they have not taken many factors into consideration. And before I go into those factors, compare that to the historical declaration of the Arab League that demanded that Hamas disarm and basically exit the Gaza Strip and hand over all the hostages, both the living and the dead. So, you know, the world is really upside down when the Arab League stand with Israel and the West goes off on some kind of self-congratulatory tangent. So let's unpack this. First of all, you can't declare a state. There has to be certain legal parameters that it fits into. And according to international legal experts, international law respects territorial integrity. Now, what territory are we speaking about? It's all very well to declare a Palestinian state, but what are the issues of contiguity? In other words, will it be a state joined? What will its capital be? What kind of security assurances? Are there the mechanisms that you need for a state? Who will be the prime minister? All these kinds of issues. What kind of statecraft needs to be in place? How is this expected to happen? You're dealing with two entities right now, Israelis and Palestinians, who are not ready to talk about a two-state solution. So you can't force it on us. You can declare as much as you want. You can say the earth is flat. It doesn't necessarily mean the earth is flat. You've got Hamas, who are sworn to the absolute destruction of the state of Israel down to the last child. And you've got the Palestinian Authority, who's basically advocate the same. Now, some Palestinians who I have spoken to have said, all it does is perpetuates the cycle of violence for them too. Because there's Hamas, which treats them as human shields. And you've got a corrupt body or entity in the Palestinian Authority. So neither is a good solution. We clearly don't want to live together, Israelis and Palestinians. We have our own national aspirations and basically need as amicable as possible a divorce. You can't force the two parties together. There's no way that is going to happen. And I know that there are those who say one state, rainbow nation, tra-la-la-la-la. It's not going to happen. And again, I would caution Western leaders. You live in the West. This is the Middle East. You can't force Western norms and Western style democracy on many peoples of the Middle East. Israel might have the same democratic values as you do, but a Palestinian state may not have that. You can't force it. So, it's all very well to declare, but how is this going to happen? You can't just poof a Palestinian state out of nowhere. This has to be negotiated, and it can't be forced. It can't be forced on us. It has to be negotiated by the leaders of the two peoples who it affects, Israelis and Palestinians. And you can see both sides are not going to budge on many issues. And here I must say, I also blame Prime Minister Netanyahu, because many leaders have been saying, okay, what is the plan for Gaza the day after? And he has not presented anything. And in my opinion, and this is my opinion, and please don't shoot me down, it has created a vacuum for Western leaders to try and push it on us. So, yeah, this is where we stand. Interesting times ahead. But the short answer to that is no, you can't just force a state on both of us. So that being said, let's take a look at your mensches and your morons of the week, and we'll start with the morons. So we have quite a few. We have Miriam Margolis. She is an actress from Harry Potter. She's vehemently anti-Israel. She has accused the Jewish people of basically becoming Nazis. And I think that for somebody who brags about her farts and her oral sex habits in television interviews, maybe you should sit this one out, Mir. you know, I think you should hocus pocus a magic spell from the Harry Potter movies you were in and sit this one out. The BBC, another one who makes the moron list of the week. It was leaked earlier this week that a memo went out instructing journalists at the BBC to push the narrative that Israel is deliberately starving children. A very, very dangerous blood libel that many people have run with despite the complexities and the facts on the ground. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, for all the reasons mentioned in yesterday's edition of the Israel Brief. If you haven't watched it, please go and watch it. And my personal pick of moron of the week is the New York Times for putting on the cover a picture of little Muhammad al-Matuk, who suffers from cerebral palsy, and putting it out there as the image of starving Palestinian children. Now, this was the blood libel heard around the world, picked up by the Daily Express and others. It is not just the exploitation of a little boy, but it is a deliberate lie, because when you zoom out to the rest of that photo, you see his brother, gorgeous little child, who is perfectly fine. Passing children off who have debilitating diseases, and the New York Times aren't the only one, and that's not the only child, is absolutely macabre and disgusting. And there are rumors that Israel will sue the New York Times. I don't know if it's true, but I really hope it is, because it's time to put an end to this absolute nonsense that is going to cost us lives. So let's take a look at the mensches of the week. And I have a lovely recommendation for the hostage families, for their integrity, for their courage in what is the most unimaginable situation, but also for doing something quite unprecedented yesterday. And that is making a political intervention following Keir Starmer's absolutely ludicrous demands on Israel, or political ultimatum. And one step further, Emily Damari, the former hostage who has dual citizenship, for absolutely shaming him. I wonder if it actually got through to his head or his foreign minister. And my personal choice of mensches of the week are the Arab League for signing that declaration condemning Hamas, condemning the atrocities of the 7th of October, demanding the immediate release of all hostages, the living and the dead, and also calling on Hamas to disarm and vacate the Gaza Strip. So that's it from me for this week, guys. Please join me again on Monday. In the meantime, check out our website at www.layoftheland.online. Our YouTube channel is right here at the Israel Brief. If you like us, please click on that subscribe button. We're on Facebook at Lottel's site, on Instagram at Rolene_Marks, and on LinkedIn at Rolene Marks. So guys, God bless you all. Have a wonderful weekend. Shabbat Shalom. And I will see you again on Monday. Bye for now.